Last mouthful of tea. Anyway, as always, thanks for joining me, everybody. This evening, I'm going to be looking at some of the ways to try to break some of that programming, if you want to call it that conditioning that we introject from the narcissistic people in our lives. The things that we're the bad guy for having boundaries, for saying no. Everything we do is going to fail. We rely on them. We need them. We shouldn't make decisions for ourselves, and so on. And in a long-term situation or environment or relationship with someone like that, we can often be left with this negative kind of feedback going around in our head, where we're constantly second guessing ourselves. Sometimes we get stuck in this narrative, this inner critic, as I've talked about previously. Our our super ego just becomes so hypercritical. So I just thought this evening it would be useful to learn a few ideas. I'm going to draw on different things. I'm going to look at different self care techniques. I'm going to be looking at a little bit of solution focused work, different ideas to maybe help us to move forward, to break that cycle, if you will, challenge the narrative, rewrite the script, write a new script, if you want to call it that. The first thing I would say is it's always a good idea to start with therapy. Go and see a therapist, get yourself a counselor. If you have to see several counselors before you find one who maybe gets it, who understands you, who you feel comfortable working with, that's perfectly okay. Keep on going till you find a therapist. Get help and support from a therapist. Doesn't do any harm as well if you want to reconnect with others, maybe friends, family members you might have lost contact with, or maybe go and meet new friends. I often think the antidote to toxic people is good, healthy people. So either reconnect with or form new relationships with people. But I think in order to break that programming, I'm just going to call it programming if you want to call it, because it is like a form of brainwashing, if you will. It does require intent. I think what we need to do is maybe to start learning to live with intent. We find a direction, we find something we want to do, a version of ourselves we feel comfortable with. And that's what we aim for. And we do it with intent. Ways to do that can be just beginning to look after ourselves. And this is something that's not often talked about, but sometimes in narcissistic relationships and situations, people sometimes stop looking after themselves. And that could be different reasons to stop doing things in their own best interest. Sometimes their diet might change. They're eating convenience foods, things like that. They're not necessarily exercising. They can get caught in a cycle of anxiety, depression, and so on. And I do think it's important to maybe look after ourselves. And different things you can do for self care is maybe just first and foremost is just to be kind to yourself. Cut yourself a bit of slack, show yourself a little bit of compassion, give yourself time and space. Do the things that you know are in your own best interest, things that can help you to relax, to unwind. Could be changing your diet. It could be going back to the intent. It could be getting out of that bad habit of. By the way, there's nothing wrong with pizza or something once in a while, but maybe not necessarily every night. Trying to eat a little more healthily, take up some kind of exercise, even if it's just going for a walk. You could go to the gym, you could do anything, but even just going for a walk, anything at all, some kind of physical activity. Try to get a balanced sleep. Sometimes when our mind is racing, we find it hard to sleep. Our sleep gets disrupted. Our mind could be racing, constantly analyzing things, replaying situations, and wondering what about this and what about that. And I have a few videos on it, but there's also a live stream I did where I looked at rumination, ways to break the cycle, the habit of rumination. Just one of those ways could be not trying not to think about it, but maybe changing how you think about it. For instance, a lot of the times we would ask questions like, why? Why this? Why that? Why did I? Why did they? You give yourself permission to think about it for a very short space of time. You maybe say, I'm going to give myself 2 minutes, or I'm going to give myself 5 minutes. You maybe start asking questions like, how did it happen? Where did it happen? When did it happen? Things like that. And after those 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is, and this does take a little bit of discipline, that's when you stop, you go back to doing what you're doing. You get into that habit and try to get some kind of a balanced sleep. A lot of people find things like mindfulness. There's different meditations, guided meditations, sleep things. Things can help us relax to get over. So try to work on your sleep patterns as well. You can tell it's late in the evening here. I'm already slurring my words, and I promise you that was tea, nothing else in it. I said a moment ago about connecting with others. So either reconnect with people who you were close to previously, people who were supportive. Try to maybe form new relationships with new people. Now, even if that's in a workplace, could just be in your community. You don't have to be best friends, but what you're doing is you're connecting with people who are going to treat you decently, so that you learn, so that you're, if you will, you're getting new memories. And sometimes those memories will trigger older memories as well when other people have treated you decently. I think sometimes a little bit of maybe voluntary work, if you want to call it that, but in one way or another, helping other people can be very useful as well. I think there is something empowering in being able to help other people, and when they can help us as well, whenever it's mutual. Um, Whenever we're benefiting others, we can feel as if we're doing something worthwhile. We feel as if we're doing something worthwhile. We might feel as if we are worthwhile. We begin to feel better about ourselves. Um, it's not up to me to tell people not to drink. What I often say to people is you just pay attention to how much, how often, and why. Sometimes there is something social about maybe having a beer or something with somebody, or a glass of wine with somebody. There is something sort of beneficial socially there. But bearing in mind that alcohol is a depressant. The more we take, it stays in our system, our mood lowers, things like that. And sometimes we think we have to take more in order to feel better. So just monitor how much you're drinking. It's not about don't drink, but it's paying attention to how much, how often, and why. Okay. So they're just looking at some of the different ways you can look after yourself. I suppose something else has just popped into my head. If there was something that you enjoyed doing, something, a type of music you liked listening to or whatever, that maybe you haven't listened to in a while, or whatever, maybe try and get back into it. Try to revisit that, as well as being open to maybe listening to new kinds of music. I say that because music can be it can affect our moods in a lot of different ways. We could be listening to something with a lot of energy, whenever we're doing housework or something. We could be listening to loud rock music when we're driving our car. Music can influence our moods. So maybe get back into a music that you kind of enjoyed, or try to maybe experiment, listen to new kinds of music. So you just think of some of the ways that you can relax, look after yourself, take care of yourself. What you're really doing is you're engaging in, as I say, self-care. You're caring about yourself. You're resting, you're recharging, you're doing things in your own best interest. When you do this, sometimes it can help build your resilience. It gives you the energy to face the difficult things you have to face. Otherwise, a lot of times we feel burnt out, we feel tired, we feel empty, and so on. So you look at the different ways you can self-care. Another thing to do is to give yourself permission to try. Many people who've been in toxic, controlling, abusive situations and relationships, again, a lot of decisions they made might have been challenged, might have been questioned, might have been criticized. We're often led to believe we can't make decisions. We're always going to make the wrong one. You give yourself permission to try. And when you give yourself permission to try, by the way, you're giving yourself permission to fail at something. Sometimes we fear failing because we think we're going to be ridiculed. We're going to be laughed at. We're going to be rejected, scorned, things like that. That's not a nice feeling, by the way, because sometimes that does happen, but we have to give ourselves permission to at least try. Even if we fail, what does that actually mean? Maybe we just learned something that wasn't for us. We learned a way that didn't work. We can change something. We can change direction. We can change our approach. When we try anything, as I say, we risk failing, but we also risk succeeding. Okay, that's the important thing that we're looking at. And when it comes to change, I'm going to talk you through, as I mentioned, some solution-focused stuff, some ideas to help. Now, I did go through, a long time ago, I went through a live stream when I talked about 3 questions, solution-focused questions. I'm just going to touch on them briefly this evening, go a little bit more in depth on some of the motivational kind of questions. But whatever it is we're struggling with, you could ask yourself, can I change it? There are some things we cannot change. We cannot change the past. We cannot change other people. So we look at what we can change. Can we change our approach to something? Can we change how we think about something, how we behave towards something, how we feel about something? There are different things we can change. Not necessarily the situation itself, but we can change something else, maybe about ourselves. So the first question is, whatever you're struggling with, can I change it? Second question is, can I accept it? I think a lot of people struggle with acceptance. I always say about acceptance, one of the reasons why we find it difficult is I think we look at it the wrong way. Accepting something doesn't mean it's okay. Doesn't mean you approve of it. When we accept something, sometimes we're just acknowledging it is what it is. And sometimes what we may say, depending on the situation that we're in, we might say something like, well, I will accept it for now, but only for now. Because it doesn't have to be a permanent thing, not always. And the last one is, can I just leave it alone? Can I let it go? That, again, can be very difficult. Letting go of something can be one of the most difficult things we'll ever do. Can also be one of the most liberating things we'll ever do. And sometimes when we choose to just leave something alone, it doesn't mean it doesn't matter. Sometimes all we're saying to ourselves is, I am not going to allow this to waste any more of my time. I will not allow this to eat away at any more of me. It's taken up too much of my time, too much of my resources, and it's given me nothing back. Sometimes when we decide to just let something go, that same energy can be put somewhere else. Again, living with intent. That same amount of energy, sometimes less, by the way, that same amount of energy can help us get to where we need to be. So those 3 questions, can I change it? Can I accept it? Can I just let it go? Other questions to think about can be, is it mine to change in the first place? There are things out there can cause us a lot of grief, a lot of stress, a lot of misery, a lot of heartache. Other people, the way they behave could have been horrible, could have been terrible, could have been toxic. And as much as we would love to see a better version of them, we cannot change them. They are not ours to change in the first place. What we can also ask is, well, why change? Why would change be important? When people come to therapy, when people go to see a counselor, it is because maybe something has to change. Something has to be different. Something's not working. Something hurts. Something they don't understand. Something has to change somehow. So we ask ourselves, well, why change? If we don't change, then maybe we stay where we are. We stay stuck. The things that are hurting us continue to hurt us. The things that prevent us doing the things we need to do, being the things we need to be, they keep us stuck. They keep us in that place. So something maybe needs to change. I think the difficulty sometimes is we don't know what to change or how to change. Going back to what I said about therapy, that's where a counselor can help. Okay. But to explore change, what would we like to be different? Well, we can ask, well, what would change look like? How would it feel? What would be different? What would I do with it even if I had it? And even stepping outside of yourself, asking questions like, what would others see? What would others notice? What would they see that's different? Would they be impressed? We ask different questions like that. I also think it can be useful to look at questions the opposite way around, because sometimes they make a little more sense. Sometimes they can motivate us a little better. So you could ask yourself, what would happen if I don't change? Whatever it is I need to do, what happens if I don't do it? Some things can bring up a lot of distress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry. There could be fear of consequences, and those consequences could be very real. But if we were to ask ourselves, what would the consequences be if I don't do something about this? Many times I think what we're looking for is maybe the easy route out, the safe route out, the path of least resistance. Take it from me, I'm a big believer in do not make things too difficult for yourself. If there is an easy route, believe me, I will find it. We don't necessarily want to overcomplicate and make things difficult for ourselves. However, the path of least resistance, the easy route, the quick and easy route, rarely takes us where we want it to. More often than not, it can lead us to further hardship and misery. So we ask ourselves, what happens if I don't do something? Let me put it to you this way. Everything you ever do is going to have some kind of a consequence. Whether that's positive or negative, by the way, there's going to be some kind of a consequence. Some consequences may be unforeseen, things we couldn't have predicted, we couldn't have seen coming. That being said, again, whether it's positive or negative really depends on what it is. But everything you ever do will have a consequence. Everything you don't do will have a consequence as well. In order to explore change and maybe motivate ourselves, maybe we need to look at the consequences on both sides. Maybe, I don't know if this is the right way of phrasing this, but sometimes I think that the power we have is the power to choose our consequences, even if they're difficult ones. They may be difficult, that being said, but maybe only in the short term. In the longer term, it could be something we might thank ourselves for. It could be something we're glad we did. So pay attention on both sides to those consequences. So looking at the motivational side as well, if you think about something you would like to be different, something you would like to change, you put yourself on a scale, okay? I like scales. Scales are good. They're a good way of visualizing things, unless you want to write it down and you can see it better, but you can even visualize it in your head. 0, you cannot be bothered. You just cannot be asked. 10, you're going to go out at a warp speed. Okay, so that's your scale. You put yourself on that scale. How prepared are you to make that change? How important is that change to you? And wherever it is you put yourself on that scale, then ask yourself afterwards, if it was just 1 point higher, what would I do? What would be different? Just 1 point higher. That's all. They're good ways to encourage and to motivate yourself. Another way of looking at change, and this actually comes from a while ago, I did a live stream with Ruth Ann Harper, and something she said I thought was a really good way of looking at motivation and change. We might feel a lot of anxiety. We might feel a lack of energy or whatever, and we know something could well be in our best interest, but we just struggle to find the energy to do whatever, or even maybe the confidence to do whatever it is. And what she said was, go ahead and do it, because the motivation comes afterwards whenever we begin to see the benefit of it, whenever we recognize maybe we're growing in confidence or whatever, whenever we're beginning to see the benefits of these things that we're doing, that's when the motivation comes. A lot of the time, if we're waiting for motivation to just hit us, I think that's when we get into procrastination habits, things like that. We will keep on putting it off. We will keep on talking ourselves out of it. So I thought that was good advice from her. I would like to claim that as mine, but Ruth, if you're watching, I'm giving you credit for it. Go ahead and do it. After you've done it, the motivation will start to come, especially if you start to build a routine around something. Going back to what I said about you do things with intent, you build a routine around it. An example could be, let's say you want to get fit and you want to go to the gym, but it's something you're just not really into. It's something you don't do, but you know, it's something that you might benefit from, you might enjoy. There's also the social aspect of it and lots of stuff. You set a time, maybe just once a week, and that could be, say, a Monday night at 7 p.m. You're going to go for 1 hour. That's in your diary. That's when you go, regardless of anything else, regardless of what the weather's like. You go at that time, 7 o'clock. You build a routine around it, and you might begin by dragging your feet. You might be trying to talk yourself out of it. Even by the second or third time, you might be thinking, well, I am benefit, but I'm not quite in that habit yet, and so on. You stick at it, you become consistent. It just becomes second nature. It's something you do. And you can take that approach, you can apply that to most things. You build a routine around whatever it is. That's the time that you do it. That's when you do it. And the thing about change is, if you think about it, change is a constant thing. It happens anyway. Everybody changes. You know, we fashions change. We change. We grow older. You know, we change jobs. We can change our mind. Everything changes. Sometimes change happens and it's something we have to adapt to. And depending on the change, sometimes we're able to do that. We can do it quite easily. We're quite adaptive. We're more adaptive than I think we give ourselves credit for sometimes. Other times, change is something maybe we have to initiate. Not only do we have to initiate it, we have to maintain it and sustain it as well until it stops being change, if you will, stops being adjusting. It becomes the new normal. It isn't always easy, but I think whenever we do recognize something we would like to improve, something we would like to be better, a particular direction we want to go in, maybe the type of person we would like to be, I think what we're doing is we're taking responsibility for ourselves. We're showing a little bit of autonomy. We're showing a little bit of self-empowerment. We're showing a lot of different things like that. And I think it's whenever we do that, that's when we start to grow. It's very hard to grow whenever we stay stuck in the same space. If you were in, again, if you were in a narcissistic relationship, chances are you were stuck. Especially if it was a long time, a long-term relationship or environment, you might have found you were stuck for a very long time. Any kind of autonomy on your part might have been frowned upon. Again, constant criticism, judgment, things like that. So we tend to stay stuck. The difficulty with a narcissistic relationship as well is, as much as they don't particularly, narcissistic people don't like you doing too well because they fear you might outshine them. They don't want you doing badly either because that might reflect badly on them. So it's this very tight little kind of zone that you're operating in. Going back to what I was saying earlier, you need to give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to feel, to come out of that, to give yourself permission to feel. We don't generally learn anything unless we get it wrong. It's perfectly okay to do that. We also give ourselves permission to succeed. And when we do that, you notice our comfort zone, if that's what you want to call it, our comfort zone begins to widen. We start to grow in confidence. We start to become a bit more resilient and things like that. So you need to give yourself permission to try these things. So I hope some of those motivational type questions, solution finding questions, I hope you find those helpful to be able to find ways through or around some of the problems, some of the obstacles that might be in your path. Actually, I've just thought of another one, especially when it comes to things like procrastination, or whenever we feel, you know, we're talking ourselves out of something, we're thinking of all the things that could go badly wrong. Whatever the problem is, whatever it is you think it is that's stopping you from doing whatever it is you want to do, try to imagine if that wasn't there, if that wasn't a problem, if that wasn't an issue, what would you do differently? Just give that some thought, because sometimes it could be a real problem. It really could. In which case, what we have to do is find a way to navigate through, around it, or get some kind of support or whatever. Or we have to try a different approach. Other times, again, if we've been constantly criticized, judged harshly, and things like that, sometimes we're talking ourselves out of it. It feels safer to be stuck here. This little operating space just feels safer. So you think about what the thing is or the things are that are stopping you. Ask yourself, what if they weren't there? What if that wasn't a problem? Let me give you an example. I want to apply for a promotion in work. Okay, I want to go for the supervisor's role or whatever it is. I want a different job. I want a bit more money, a bit more responsibility. But you were in a relationship or an environment where someone was continually telling you you're not too smart, you're not good at what you do, everything you do turns to crap, you're a failure, whatever it is. So these are the things that are talking us out of it. Because if we were to think, I want to go for that job, I want to get that promotion, we might be thinking, yeah, but then they'll say, then he would say this, or then she would do that. If you will, what we're doing is, I think sometimes is we're arguing against ourselves on their behalf. If you know what I mean, it's a strange thing. We are arguing against ourselves based on what they might say or what they might think. Now, this is the thing about thoughts. Regardless of what they might think, they might feel very envious, they might feel jealous, they might feel, resentful, they might feel a lot of things. But when it comes to thoughts, the only power a thought has is what you give it. In the real world, it doesn't have any power whatsoever. Your thoughts, my thoughts, the only power they have is what we give them. How they influence is what we do with them. So if our thoughts don't have any power in the real world, what power do theirs have? I would suggest even less. In the sense that you don't become any taller or any shorter based on what someone thinks of you. You don't become any younger or any older based on what someone thinks about you. You will not become a helicopter because someone thinks you're a helicopter. Now, if anybody wants to put in the comments that they grew propellers once and started hovering just because someone said it, okay, not going to engage with that kind of question, but no, it's true. We don't like what people think. We don't like what people feel. We, especially if it's negative towards us, we are social creatures. We like to be liked. We like to be approved of and so on. But in reality, thoughts do not have any power in the real world. So if I was to do this, then they would think this and they would say that. Yeah, that might hurt our feelings. That might be hurtful. It could be a lot of different things. That could bring up distress in us. It could bring up embarrassment. Doesn't change a damn thing. The only power these things have is what we give them. I just lost my train of thought there. So this is what happens when I go off script. Anyway. One second. Ooh, it's gone cold. Someone put the kettle on there and make me some tea, would you please? I appreciate that because I can't run down at the moment. I'm talking to everyone. When we pay attention to the things that we do as well, the little things we do to look after ourselves, to encourage ourselves, to motivate ourselves, and I would even say to challenge ourselves, to challenge that inner narrative, the one that usually isn't ours. When we pay attention to those little things, not just paying attention to how difficult something might have been, or the anxiety it brought up, or what other people's reactions might have been, but also pay attention to the things that worked, the things that maybe gave us, a sense of satisfaction, a sense of encouragement, a sense of confidence. When we start to pay attention to those things as well, I think what we're doing is we're starting to rewrite that narrative as well. What we're doing is we're finding new evidence that challenges, a lot of the time challenges the narrative that has little to nothing to back it up. So pay attention to those little things, those little minor successes. Something else that I believe, and there's different ways of approaching this, by the way. It's a chicken and egg thing. Does it happen first and then the other things happen, or do they happen and then you get these? But what you might find is you start to grow in confidence. When you start to do things in your own best interest, when you start to maybe take a bit more care of yourself, when you start to challenge yourself, when you start to face the things that you feel uncomfortable with, what you begin to notice is you start to grow in confidence. And your confidence isn't believing that you're invincible and you can do anything. Confidence is just recognizing your skill set, your qualities, things like that, your achievements, your abilities. It is also paying attention to the things that you struggle with. It's also paying attention to how we all have different skill sets. We all have different levels of skill sets. You're being a bit more balanced, if you will. You're being a bit more authentic. You're being a bit more genuine, a bit more honest with yourself. You begin to grow in confidence. You also begin to grow in resilience. Your resilience is not just bouncing back from hardship and setbacks and failures and things like that. It's your ability to be resourceful, to think things through, to be able to navigate through and around different obstacles. Going back to the solution finding questions from earlier, they're good ways of building your resilience as well. When you start to ask things like, if that wasn't a problem, what would I be doing differently? Or if it was just 1 point higher on the scale, what would I be doing? You begin to grow in resilience. Sometimes you find a bit more energy. You're using less energy talking yourself out of things, and you're using that energy to talk about, how do I do these things? How do I get through them? What are my supports? What are my resources? What are my options? What are my choices? What you might find as well, whenever you do give yourself permission to fail at trying something, is you start to get in touch with your own sense of humility, because we don't know everything and we cannot do everything perfectly. And again, if you were in a situation or an environment with someone who's narcissistic, well, what can I say? Narcissism and humility are generally not two words that go in the same sentence. Okay. You might sometimes see a false humility, but it's certainly not humility. Humility is just sometimes recognizing your limits. It's recognizing there are some things you do not know. Some people might have more experience and skill in certain areas than you. That's pretty much all it is. It is not, trailing your knuckles on the floor and moaning you're no good at anything. That's not humility. So you have a good, healthy level of humility. And the last thing, whenever you do start to face the things you're uncomfortable with, and you're giving yourself permission to try new things, to become the version of you, if you will, that you want to be, the version of you that you'd like to be, you might find you start to become a bit more courageous as well. You're more willing to take risks, not crazy, silly, reckless risks. I always say you don't put a month's wages on a horse just to see what's going to happen. Measured risks, safe risks. You are prepared to try. I think ultimately, whenever you're reprogramming yourself, if you're rewriting that narrative, you've got the right support in place, the right support network. You're doing things in your own best interest. You're helping others. You're looking after yourself. You are exploring options. You're growing in different ways. I think it can help us become a little bit more authentic, a little bit more genuine, which is often the very thing. Again, they are not generally words you find in the same sentence as narcissism. You start to become, maybe you just start to become who you were meant to be, who you always were in the first place, until someone tried to talk you out of it. So That's just a few ideas to help. I'm just going to give you a few little, if you will, sound bites. These don't come from me. These are friends of mine that have shared these with me over the years. Just little things, little narratives you can say to yourself. Just little affirmations, if you will. Things you might find helpful. And the first one is, I need to be both gentle and firm with myself in order to change. I think that sounds quite good. We can be gentle and firm at the same time. So I need to be both gentle and firm with myself in order to change. Second one is, anxiety is uncomfortable, but that's all it is. It's not necessarily dangerous. Anxiety can be a normal feeling in the sense that it's our way of telling ourselves, I need to be cautious, I need to be on my toes, something's happening or it could happen, I'm not quite sure how it's going to go. We can learn that there can be normal, healthy levels of anxiety depending on the situation. For instance, you go for a job interview, of course you're going to feel anxious. You have to give a speech or maybe a presentation, of course there's going to be a level of anxiety. Recognizing it can sometimes be an uncomfortable feeling, but it's not necessarily dangerous. Now, what we can do is we can have panic attacks and things like that whenever we're not regulating how we feel. But this is about learning how to regulate how we feel. Recognize that sometimes our feelings are normal responses to a particular situation. They might be out of proportion. They might not be an accurate reflection of what's happening. We can also recognize it's most thoughts, feelings as well. Feeling can come over as like a wave. But a lot of thoughts can be automatic, even negative ones, in the sense that they just pop into your head. You could be walking down the road, thinking about, well, I need to get milk or something. And a thought pops into your head about some movie you watched when you were 10, just popped in there automatically. A lot of thoughts are automatic. It's the uncomfortable ones that we call intrusive. The ones that cause a level of distress that might bring up that anxiety I mentioned a moment ago. And what we often try to do is push it out of our head. Do you ever notice the more you try to push something out of your head, the more uncomfortable it becomes? We can recognize a lot of these things are automatic. They just pop in there. And as I said earlier on, sometimes it's not that we don't think about it. It's how do we think about it? We also recognize whatever the feeling is coming up. It could be an uncomfortable feeling. Sometimes we will call it anxiety, and it could well be. We could be feeling uncertain, a lack of control. We could be feeling threatened. We could be feeling embarrassed. We could be feeling a lot of different things. So we recognize these thoughts are automatic. Sometimes we recognize these feelings come over as like a wave. So what we can say to ourselves as well is it's okay to feel the way I do. It's okay to have feelings. You don't have to act on them. You can if you choose to. Sometimes it's in your best interest. Your feelings are there to inform you, after all. If you're swimming along in the water and a big great white shark comes swimming up to you with its mouth open and its teeth all ready, the last thing you want to do is practice a mindfulness exercise just to calm yourself down. That's probably not a good idea. You're going to go into panic mode. You're going to take off like a torpedo. That's a normal reaction to a very scary situation. Other than that, we can have a feeling, we can have a sensation, we can have an urge. We don't necessarily have to act on it. Again, we can learn how to regulate how we feel. Probably going back about a year ago, if you go back and search through all the live streams, you will find a live stream where I talked about identifying and regulating our emotions and so on. So watch that. There might be something useful in it. You can also recognize as well, I don't have to fight my feelings. I think that's quite a powerful one in the sense that, again, if you were in a relationship with a narcissistic person, you weren't allowed to feel good because that would maybe take away something from them. They can be very envious. But then you're not allowed to feel bad either, because there's something wrong with you for being depressed or something. So what we did is we tended to try and hide how we felt. You don't have to fight your feelings. How you feel is perfectly normal. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be an accurate reflection of what's going on, but your feelings are normal. We all have them. Sometimes the way those feelings can influence, as I think, it's just come into my head that we can acknowledge the feelings. We can find ways to gently turn into a different direction. We can move away from fear, for instance, away from anxiety, away from depression. We can find ways to turn gently into or towards another direction. That's going to be different for everybody, by the way. It's not that I feel sad, I immediately want to feel happy, or I feel bored, I immediately want to feel excited. But what we can do, again, if we're feeling low, we could give someone a ring, meet them for a coffee. If we are feeling really anxious, we could go do some exercise, burn off some of that energy. Sometimes in the absence of the energy, we can think about things a little differently. We could do some reframing exercises. We could write down all the things that are bothering us. Take that page, fold it up, put it in your back pocket, in the drawer, whatever. Leave it. Go back to doing whatever it is you were doing. But then come back later on, later that day, the following day. Read what you wrote and notice it doesn't have the power it had. I always say when it's in your head, we've got a head like a TARDIS. It's always bigger on the inside. When it's inside and then we keep on ruminating, analyzing, catastrophizing, it gets so much bigger. Once it's out there, it tends to lose its power. So we can find different ways of gently turning towards something else, not necessarily sticking our fingers in our ears going la 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 la, hoping to get rid of it. We can allow our anxiety, I'm sticking with anxiety, it could be a lot of different things. We can be anxious, but still focus on whatever it is we need to do. Remember, our anxiety is just our way of saying, I need to be cautious. I need to be ready. I need to be on my toes. Something's happening or it could happen. And we can also, as we're doing that, notice that the anxiety starts to lessen. What happens is, as I said earlier, we face the things we're uncomfortable with. We start to become more confident. We start to become a bit more courageous. What happens is the anxiety doesn't go away. It starts to dilute. It's not as intense. So the anxiety can still inform us, but it's not making decisions for us. As we're learning to regulate how we feel, well, again, I'm only anxious because I'm not sure of the outcome here. The outcome might not necessarily be as bad as I fear it is. Again, I'm being very general here. But the anxiety lessens as we focus on what it is we need to do. Sometimes as well, go back to those solution finding questions. Can I change it? Can I accept it? Can I just leave it alone? Sometimes it's like our choices can feel overwhelming because, again, we're looking at the consequences. We magnify the consequences. Our catastrophic thinking can do that sometimes. If we were to look at it objectively, the consequences could be uncomfortable, but they're not necessarily overwhelming. Going back to, if I did this, they're not going to like me for it. If they're abusing you, they already don't like you. Okay. Sometimes we just need to look at these things objectively. So things can only seem overwhelming. Sometimes, let me put it to you this way. It's like you spend all day Sunday worrying about something on Monday. Monday comes, doesn't happen. Spent all of that Sunday terrified about whatever it was, and it didn't manifest. Other times, we could spend that Sunday worrying about whatever it is. Again, we're catastrophizing. It's going to be absolutely awful. The Monday comes, and it does happen. But it's not the nuclear apocalypse you expected. It's more like a limp indoor firework. It wasn't as bad as we feared. So it's recognizing that some of these things can seem overwhelming. We need to learn from those times when, if you will, we could prove ourselves wrong, when we were wrong, when things didn't work out the way we'd feared. And the last thing that's on this list is to recognize that you have more strength, support, resilience than sometimes you think you do. Sometimes we're led to believe certain things, that we're no good at anything and we're going to fail at everything, and that no one likes us and everyone hates us and the whole world is in a dreadful state and it's all because of me. We're led to believe these things. And it's the thing about our beliefs, they're either fact or feeling. If they cannot withstand scrutiny, why have them? We can't stand over our beliefs. Why do we have them? It's worth paying attention to those other things, to be able to challenge those beliefs, recognizing you're stronger than you give yourself credit for. You're more resilient than sometimes you think. So what I like about solution-focused work is the way you sometimes explore exceptions, because we'll say it's always this, it's never that. What we're doing is we're generalizing. There are exceptions. There are always exceptions. There are times when, who knows, maybe we were the bravest one in the room. Maybe we were the funniest one in the room. We were the smartest one in the room. There are been times when things did work out for us, even if no one else liked it and they criticized us for it. They did still work out for us. It is worth paying attention to those exceptions. So we recognize we have more strength, more resilience. We're more resourceful. We can think on our feet better than sometimes we believe we can. Sometimes we don't come up with instant solutions and instant ideas. That's okay. Sometimes we have to give it a bit of thought. We have to explore options, but we can still be resilient. Sometimes we have more support than we think. We might be thinking of a group around us, a group of people. If we have that, that's great. We might have a best friend, so much the better. That support can come from places that you wouldn't think. That could come from just members of the community saying hello on your way past, showing you, again, treating you with decency. There could be online support. There are a lot of forums out there. There's a lot of people sharing ideas. There's a lot of resources on the internet people can download to help themselves. I always say, discern what you're watching and discern what you're downloading. Discern what you're, what advice you're taking. But it is still there. There is more support than sometimes you think. So, these are just some ideas to help, if you will, rewrite that narrative, the one that often gets implanted is over long periods of time. To be able to challenge the belief that everything we do turns to crap. To be able to explore our way through and out of things. To be able to think things through maybe in a more balanced way. To live with a bit more intent. To think about the person we want to be, the person we would need to be, and sometimes what we might need in order to get there. The last thing I will say on this is you don't have to be there by tomorrow morning. That's perfectly okay. And by the way, the journey that you want to go on, who knows, you might change direction many times. That's perfectly okay. It's your journey. So, I hope you found this evening helpful. I am going to have a look at some questions, and if I can remember correctly, there's a button here that I can push and it pops out. Aha, there we go. So, right, let's have a look. That means having to go back all the way to the beginning. Hello, Carol. Hello, Polly. Hello, Columbia. Hello, Laura. Who else have we got? Hello, Ellie and Noel. Noel says, I've generally found the courage to make a change when the pain of staying stuck overcomes the fear of the unknown. Noel, that is a really good way of putting it. That's a good way of putting, paraphrase what I said a moment ago or earlier on. We pay attention to the consequences of doing something, but we also have to pay attention to the consequences of not doing something. These things in our own best interest, of course, if we want to move forward in life. The power we have is being able to choose our consequences. And what you're saying there is finding courage to make a change when you recognize the pain of staying. So that's really good advice. Thanks for sharing that, Noel. Hello, Ellie, Carol. Giving myself permission to feel negative emotions helps. Yeah, and that's the thing about negative emotions. I know we do tend to label things as positive and negative, and again, there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. But we need to be honest with ourselves as to why something is positive or negative. Because if you think of a word like love and a word like hate, okay, love's positive, hate is negative. That could well be true. But what if someone were to say they love to see little baby kittens, struggling, whatever? It's not so positive then. Or what about if someone says they hate to see little baby kittens in pain? It's not so negative then. So it's what we apply to these things. Yeah, we can generalize as positive and negative, but it's what that means to us. It's how that applies, how we're applying that. We can feel uncomfortable feelings, negative emotions, things like that. We can feel those things. We can feel uncomfortable feelings. Again, when we pay attention to our feelings, they can inform us. They don't have to make decisions for us, not all the time. Okay, where do we get to? Robin says, thanks, Darren. I've watched you for some time. Decided to thank you in person. Your calm, common sense approach shows your deep experience and your awareness of solid research and emerging research. The words Darren and common sense rarely go in the same sentence, but thank you anyway. I do appreciate that. I'm glad that you find the stuff helpful. That's the important thing. I also have a strange sense of humor, as you probably noticed. So Robin, yeah, I'm glad that you find the stuff helpful. Yes, I do like to look at the research. I do like to look at emerging research. I don't always get the chance, but I do try to keep up to date. I think it's important to be able to say what I'm saying and be able to back it up with research. Otherwise, all you're getting is my opinion. I waffle anyway, but otherwise all you're getting is me waffling and just saying what pops into my head as if it's a good idea. I think it is important to be able to back up what you're saying by the work of, much more intelligent people that have put a lot more time and effort into it than certainly I have. So anyway, I'm waffling again, but no, great. Thank you. Glad you like it. Joy says, thank you for your guidance through this difficult time. Many blessings. So Joy, glad you find it helpful. It's good. Good to know. I like the scales too. It helps thinking. Yeah. I'm a very visual person. I kind of think things through by seeing them, if you know what I mean. And I think the scale is a good way from 0 to 10. You can use that for anything. It could be anxiety, it could be anger, the 0 at one end, the 10 at the other. And depending on which way the scale is, it's either what improves it by 1 point or what reduces it by 1 point. What gets you 1 point closer to where you'd like to be. And this is the thing, especially if it's something like anxiety. Let's say 0, you're fine, and 10, your wit's end. You might be an 8. That could be quite high. You could recognize that 8 lasts for 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. It doesn't last the whole day. It could be situational. So you're recognizing that. But even if it is quite high, you could ask yourself, what would make it a 7? That 1 point, what would make it a 7? What reduces it by 1 point? So you're not looking for something to make it easy. Again, that quick, easy path. You're just looking for something to make it easier. What you might find as well is when you reduce something by just 1 point, actually reduces it by about 3 or 4. So you're looking for ways to make things easier, not necessarily easy. The scale is a really good way of doing that, I believe. Columbia says, learning non-violent communication skills, learning to assert with loving kind boundary making. Yeah, I think communication is really important. I think a lot of the time, a lot of difficulties in relationships, whether it's with a partner or people you work with, um, I think it often comes down to the communication. It's not just what we say, it could be how we say it, could be whether we say it at all. But it also comes down to the listening as well. I think we have to pay attention. If we're not fully listening, it's like, what stops us listening? Well, someone could be talking. We're already thinking of an answer before they've even finished, so we're not actually listening. So it is worth communication. I do believe is very important in any kind of relationship. Carol says gratitude daily. Carol, I would say that that's actually a good thing. Showing a bit of gratitude can be really helpful, and that is something that I missed out on tonight. So I'll just touch on that briefly. Showing a bit of gratitude for things, whether regardless of what that is, that could be the fact that we had dinner tonight. That could be we'll have a bed to sleep in. That could be that we have a friend or friends. We have a job to go to. We have doesn't matter what it is. Showing a little bit of gratitude can be really helpful. And I say that because, again, if you have been in a relationship with someone who's very narcissistic, chances are there was very little to any gratitude for anything. And I think that's largely because of the sense of entitlement and so on. So there's very little gratitude. Being able to recognize gratitude in ourselves, gratitude for different things, can be really helpful. Consistency and resiliency. Yeah, consistency. We form a routine around something. We need to be consistent with it. Otherwise, it isn't a routine. It's just a notion we have, something we do now and then. We need to be consistent in order to make any kind of meaningful change, I believe. Perception changes as well. You're right, on my way. Unstuck now. Truth about stuckness. Darren, this is very helpful. Good, good. It's important. That's why I'm doing this. So glad you find it helpful. Now where do we get to? Narcs on our brains. Yeah, narcs on our brains. Narcissists on our brains. We don't like things that don't make sense. That's why things go round and round in our heads so much. Sometimes we need to do a little bit of decluttering. And the best way to do that is to maybe focus on things like our own best interests. Focus on, as I said, maybe helping others, giving them permission to help us, reconnecting with people, forming new relationships, learning to live with intent. Yeah. When we do that, it's not that we don't think about people. They would pop into our head the odd time, but we don't give them too much thought. No more than maybe they deserve. Discard worn out shoes. Having to have gum on the soles. Okay. Let me see where we go to. Jumped all over the place. Correct discernment. Yeah. Plenty of time to respond rather than react. Sometimes our reactions are normal, natural to the situation. I give the example of the shark earlier. Yeah, that's a normal reaction. The panic, survival mode. But if you find yourself being goaded and being provoked, when we react, think of it this way: when we react, they have control. But whenever we respond, we have control. So it's worth looking at the difference between reactions and responses. Online groups. Some online groups can be really useful, yeah. Learning to laugh about my and others' foibles and accept human imperfection. I think there is something healthy in being able to laugh at ourselves. Yeah, maybe we need to take ourselves seriously to some level, but being able to laugh at ourselves, I think it can be a healthy thing. Don't take ourselves too seriously. God bless us, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Darren. 5 month ago video on mobbing and group harassment gave me my voice back. Mobbing and group harassment. Yeah, I remember that video. I'm really glad you found that helpful. Thank you. And thank you so much for your kindness. I appreciate that. Thank you. Listen to intuition. Yeah, listen to our intuition. Listen to our gut feeling. We feel something, we feel it for a reason. We need to pay attention to that reason. Remember, it doesn't always mean we're right. We're not mind readers, but We're feeling it for a reason. It's worth paying attention to why we're feeling it. Even the things that come up physically for us, like knots in our stomach or whatever, in certain situations, it's worth paying attention to all of those feelings, sensations, things like that. Buddhists like detachment certainly help when you notice your feelings. Yeah, it's like, I think it was maybe prior to Christmas, I think it was, or just after it, I talked about stoicism. There is something about that kind of detachment and being able to notice them. And the Buddhist, being able to notice them with a detachment, it's like mindfulness. You notice them without judging them. Yeah. Okay. Let me see. Purging via diary writing. Let me see. Feelings are what you get. Oh, I've just jumped. It's hard for me to keep up with you folks because you just type far too quickly. Where did I get to? I'm trying to get back to where I was. Right, okay. It's always very helpful. It's good. Where do you go to? 6 months since I left my husband, but I'm still having bad days. Still having days here and there when I'm terrified that I was the abuser. That I was just being mean to him. Is this common? JRR, I would say it is common that we second guess ourselves. I think it is common that we think back on interactions and we might remember times when we were aggressive. We raised our voice. That could be for a variety of reasons. We may have been, again, we may be reacting to something. We may have been so frustrated. It wasn't just a one-off thing. Things are going on. One way or another, it's not for me to say whether you're right or wrong, but I think it is common for people to second guess themselves. It is common for people to second guess themselves if the other person is claiming victimhood as well. Okay, so it's just something to be mindful of. And that's the narrative, again, so the narrative that sometimes gets implanted in our head. Sometimes we could be accused of being abusive for saying no. So it's trying to put things into context. And that's why I said one of the things that can help are healthy relationships with people that treat you decently. Because what you might find is you don't react the way you do, or the way you did. You don't react the way you did with people who are treating you decently. Okay, so where did I get to? Okay, it keeps moving. Common is reassurance seeking. Here's the future. You're having better resources than you were equipped with. I think we become more resourceful as we grow. A lot of times, sometimes we feel as if we're depleted. We feel tired. I think in the short term we can, if we're having to go through a lot. In the longer term, I think we learn new and better ways to deal with things. We do become a bit more resourceful. I think if we are engaging with people that want to bring out the best in us, that are supportive and are open to us supporting them, I think we do become a bit more resourceful in the sense that support network really widens. I get to started to tell myself, oh, sorry, jump again. Lindsay says, started to tell myself my feelings of fear in the presence of my abuser is protective. Instead of being bad and thinking I have to be positive and continuing to be in denial. I think, again, depending on the situation, what we often do, especially if it's long term, or if we've learned to react in certain ways, the way we behave is what we believe is going to get us through or out of a difficult situation. It's not for me or anyone else to judge whether that's right or wrong. But when you're out of that, again, you could be thinking, did I do the right thing? Again, coming back to the ruminating and the second guessing yourself. When you're out of the situation, like I was saying earlier, when we label things as positive or negative, we need to be honest about what we actually mean about that. Where do those labels come from? As I said, hate might be a negative word, but if I were to say, I hate to see little kittens in distress, suddenly it stops being negative. Thing about being positive as well. I am a big believer in positivity, but not to the point where, as a friend of mine once put, you're on the deck of the Titanic and you're doing a happy little song, hooray, we're half afloat. I think what we're looking for is balance, okay? We have to recognize there's positive and negative on both sides. We choose the middle path. If we only ever focus on the negative, we're ignoring things like supports. We're ignoring our resilience, our confidence. We're ignoring resources. We're ignoring our experience, our skills. If we only ever focus on the positive, maybe we're in denial. So I think trying to find balance and look for that middle path. There is negative, but there is also positive that might be able to compensate for that, to help us through around it. We just try, again, one of the last things I said about being authentic and being genuine with ourselves. We also, again, I believe the antidote to toxic people is healthy people. Now, it doesn't mean everybody's perfect and everyone's wonderful. Everybody's going to have something about them that annoys us. Just like there's something about us might annoy somebody else. But positive people in the sense of, are healthy people in the sense that, yeah, they're just decent to you. They're supportive. They're encouraging. They cheer you on whenever you succeed. They'll call you out when you're being a muppet. But good people. When we're in environments and situations with good people, we learn to stop being so defensive, stop hiding aspects of ourselves. Let me see, where do we get to? Carol says, Dr. Les Carter has a live group at noon on surviving narcissism too. Thanks for sharing that, Carol. I always say, if anyone has resources that people think would find useful, do please share them. Share them in the chat or share them in the comment box after the video. I am just but one man and this dog. I don't have a lot of resources. I can't do what a lot of people do. People like Les Carter, Jay Reid, Richard Grannon. There are others whose name escaped me. Oh, Dr. Romani, she's another one. There are others who have different groups, courses, things like that. I only know some of them. I don't know all of them. I know Richard Grannon's course, it's quite good. Jay Reid's, his course is quite good. He talked me through it one time I was talking with him. Avail of as much support and help as you can get. If you can get it online, by all means. So thanks for sharing that about Les Carter, Doctor. I haven't actually watched him in a long time. When I started YouTube, I used to watch him regularly. That's the thing. I don't watch a lot of mental health and narcissism and relationships channels. I watch silly things. I like watch comedy. I watch old clips from old movies from when I was a kid. I watch crazy things, you know. But yeah, he has got some good content. Yvette Jorgen say lots of notes to review. Thank you. You're welcome. Again, important thing is you find it helpful. Where did I get to? Every time someone chats something new, to say, just jumps all over the place. Karen says Darren has a war. War? What's that mean? I don't want to be at war. I'm far too cowardly and spineless rather. Yeah, try to be decent around folk. That's the thing. Common sense, common decency. The key term there is the word common. You know, it doesn't cost anything to be decent to people. Noel says Dr. Romani's healing program is really helpful. Brilliant. There's another recommendation. Has anyone ever told you resemble Cary Grant? Is this a reference to a joke I made when I was talking to Richard Grant about Cary Grant? My archetype of a handsome man. It's hard finding healthy people when you're used to abusive ones. Can be. I think what can sometimes happen is, again, because nobody is perfect, um, someone might do or say something that we find abrupt or harsh or whatever, and we assume they're abusive. Not necessarily. They might have had a bad moment. It just could be how they communicate or whatever. But they are out there. They are out there, and if I could give you a piece of advice on how to find them, I would. I don't. What I would say is pay attention to the people you are mixing with, the people you do meet. Just pay attention to how you interact with them. Pay attention to their behavior as well. Pay attention to your own. Pay attention to repeated patterns as well. Someone's not necessarily giving you a hard time if they're disagreeing with you or something. Could be how they're disagreeing with you. But one way or another, there are good, kind, decent people out there. I don't necessarily think they're all hiding. They might be hard to find, but they are out there. Going back to what I was saying at the beginning about the therapist, try to find a therapist. Now, just because the first therapist you go to, you don't find that helpful, that's okay. Try another one. You keep on trying until you get one. You get one that you feel comfortable working with, okay? Where do we get to? Little Shaman is good. That's someone else I haven't listened to in a long time. A Little Shaman. It's funny, when I started YouTube, I used to listen to a lot of the mental health channels and people talking about narcissism and people, as I say, talking about relationships, because I was curious to learn from them, how they were presenting stuff. A lot of people I haven't listened to in a long time. Maybe I should go back to listening. Oh, Cary Grant is a reference to my granddaughter's makeover. Yes, that's right. On social media. Yeah. My granddaughter was here at the weekend and we're having a pamper session. So I had a face mask on, whether I wanted one or not, by the way. I had a face mask on and I was told it would make me very handsome. So what I did was I posted on X a before and after picture of me with a face mask and a picture of Cary Grant. That's right. Yeah. I told you I've got weird humor. Anthony asks, can you talk about executive functions and executive abilities of person in one video? I think because of this power struggle in the relationship, people are labeled as narcissist and another as victim. Yeah. I think the word narcissist is something that is thrown about. And one of the things that does actually get me in trouble on, used to be Twitter, it's now X, was when I would say things like, a narcissist is not just someone you don't like. Things like that. The boss doesn't give you next Tuesday off. It's because they're a narcissist. No, it's not true. You're talking about a very distinct personality type. It can be very, very complex. And, which is why when I'm talking in the videos, I often talking about the common characteristics, the common traits, the common behaviors, and the motivations behind it. When it comes to any kind of personality disorder, it doesn't matter what it is, you might find that all of us do those things from time to time, once in a while, whenever we're provoked, whenever we're frightened, whenever we're angry or whatever. We do certain little things from time to time. What makes it a disorder is that these things are present all the time. They're like ramped up through the ceiling. They are really high. They're all day and every day. That's what makes them different. So when we're talking about narcissism, we're talking about narcissistic personality disorder. They're behaving like that all the time. That being said, sometimes you could get someone who is very high in narcissistic traits. Not quite enough for a disorder, but the traits are really dialed up. They can still be difficult. They can still be toxic, but it's not necessarily a disorder as such. But yeah, you're right. Sometimes you can get power balances in different relationships. And did I do? Yes, the transactional analysis. When I was talking about that, you will see power balances. At the last live stream I did talking about the power balances. I think I kind of touched on that. I illustrated those power balances. Romani, Carter, New, Armai, Trifecta, Rocks, Grey and Yellow. Oh, that's lovely. He's a leprechaun. Oh, to be sure, to be sure. Humor is the best medicine. Amen to that. Okay, I am looking. It's now 1:15. I am going to have to come to an end because I'm going to have to take Freud out. Darren, Richard, and Romani for me. Yeah, it's very kind of you. Oh, it sounds like a gang. Darren, Richard, and Romani. Didn't check the other video, check it out. Yeah, have a look at it. I talked about, as I said, the transactional analysis, parent, adult, child, and how sometimes people can push each other into certain dynamics. Talk a bit on PD families, please. I have a live, not a live stream. What do you call it? Where you put all the videos in the one playlist. I have a playlist with narcissistic families. I also, in there, you might find things like dark personality types. So you'll see the dynamics with the dark personality, where you also see psychopathy and sadism and things like that. You might find something there, but if there is something specific that you want me to talk about, if you leave the comment, I will get to it, and I will get to it eventually. Tomorrow, video is coming out. I'm looking at narcissistic siblings. Topic that was requested about 6 months ago. I do get around to them as quick as I can. It's just that there are so many of them. So talking about the dynamics that would go on in a family as adults, by the way, where a sibling who is narcissistic and a sibling who isn't, but also some of the larger family dynamics. So that will be out tomorrow at 6:30. I do hope you find it useful. I do hope you find it interesting. And if you're the one that asked for it, sorry it took me so long, but it's out. Okay. As always, everybody, look after yourselves, and I will be back in another. Oh, actually, I won't. Hold on. Just let me check my calendar, because normally I'd say I'd be back in 10 days, but in 10 days, I will not be available. So what I will do is I could either do another one next Sunday night, or I could do one on the 28th. I just have so much on at the moment. And even I need a day off once in a while. So, yeah, I will try to, because I can't do it in 10 days, which would be on a Wednesday. If I cannot do it next Sunday, I'll try and do it either the Sunday after or Wednesday, which would be the 20th. One way or another, everybody, look after yourselves, take care, and thanks again for joining me. Bye now.